enjoying the camaraderie, but if I might ask people to take their seats, we'd like to get started with today's program. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate your taking your seats. All right, thank you. Good afternoon and buenas tardes. I am Romy Diaz, President and CEO of the Pan American Association of Philadelphia. Welcome to the 2022 Pan American Day and Annual Scholarship Luncheon, which is being held in person at the Union League of Philadelphia, Lincoln Hall, and simultaneously online broadcast. For over 80 years, the Pan American Association has fulfilled its mission by promoting cultural, educational, and economic activities designed to enhance understanding and cooperation among the peoples of the Americas. We call this phenomenon Panamericanismo. In recent years, the association has focused on developing the next generation of Latinx talent in the Delaware Valley. So today, we will award several $5,000 scholarships to returning university students who have excelled academically. And we will celebrate the success of graduating seniors who will receive the Janus Bond Award and stipends. We regret that Ambassador Andrés Durán of Uruguay is unable to be with us today due to an unprecedented family tragedy. We are thankful to Ambassador Martin Silverstein for stepping in on short notice to provide today's keynote address. We are delighted with the attendance of so many distinguished community leaders. From the diplomatic community, our great friend Peter Longstreth, President of the Consular Corps Association of Philadelphia and Honorary Consul of Uruguay, Hugo Hun, Consul General of Guatemala, Carlos Obrador, Consul of Mexico, Michael Scullin, Honorary Consul of France, Edith Schwartz, Honorary Consul of Hungary, Chris Chaplin, Honorary Consul of Jamaica, John Medvekis, Honorary Consul of Latvia, Krista Bard, Honorary Consul General of Lithuania, Eli Gabay, Honorary Consul of Nicaragua, Miguel Alban, Honorary Consul of Peru, Susan Setkowski, Honorary Consul of Norway, and Irina Mazur, Honorary Consul of Ukraine. Please know that the Pan American Association, Irina, stands with Ukraine. And from Latino serving organizations, we're pleased to have the Reverend Bonnie Camarda of the Salvation Army, Cynthia Figueroa of JEVS Human Services, Joanna Otero Cruz, Women Against Abuse, and Eric Barragan, the Welcoming Center. Today's programming would not have been possible without the continued support of our partners. Pico and Constellation, Federal Home Loan Bank of Pittsburgh, Blank Rome, Comcast NBC Universal, LIFA International, of PHL CVB, Convention Visitors Bureau, Troutman Pepper, Turtle on Post LLC, and the many generous table sponsors noted in the program booklet. Without further ado, please welcome Jose Aguirre, PICO Manager of External and Government Affairs, for a few words on behalf of our presenting sponsors, PICO and Constellation. Jose?
Oh. Good afternoon, everybody. That took some time to get together. It's my pleasure to present PICO as a presenting sponsor of the 2022 Pan American Day and Annual Scholarship Luncheon. I'm honored to be here as we recognize more than 80 years of service to the community by the Pan American Association. We also applaud their commitment to addressing crucial issues of diversity and equity for the Latino community, as well as important issues affecting the Americas. Today, PICO is happy to celebrate the Pan American Day and honor the scholarship recipients from the Greater Philadelphia region who are majoring in Latin American or Latinx Studies. PICO would also like to welcome the former ambassador to Uruguay, Mr. Martin Silverstein. PICO firmly believes in the importance of fostering understanding across cultures, which is why PICO is such a proud sponsor of the Pan American Association. PICO employees contribute hundreds of hours as volunteers for the organizations that serve the Hispanic community. And PICO's employee resource group, the Philadelphia chapter of the Organization of Latinos at Excellency, or OLE, is very active in serving in the community. In addition to our employee volunteer efforts, PICO as a company also supports hundreds of organizations that promote arts and culture, STEM education, environmental sustainability, and community development. I want to thank my dear friend and former colleague, Romy Diaz, who previously served as Vice President and General Counsel for PICO. While we miss Romy greatly at PICO, we're proud of the contributions Romy continues to make to the Hispanic community in Philadelphia, particularly in his role of President and CEO of the Board of Directors for the Pan American Association. Thank you, Romy, for your dedication, service, and for inviting PICO to be part of this great celebration. Thank you all for joining today.
So thank you, Jose, for those very kind words. And I now call on Dr. Ron Webb, Ab Lecter, and Ruben Reyes to come forward and begin today's scholarship program. And please feel free to start your lunch, and we will begin as soon as Ron gets up here. All right, thanks. Okay, buen provecho.
Gracias, Romy. Waiting for my ayudantes here. Yes, my name is Ron Webb, and I'm the co-chair of the academics program here at the Pan American Association. And along with my co-chair, Rafael Arizmendi, who couldn't be here because he's going back to school today. So that's always a good thing. So let me say something about the scholarships first. The scholarships of the Pan American Association of Philadelphia are intended to encourage and reward Philadelphia area college students for their academic achievement, their community service, and their engagement with Latin America overall. Over the years, the association has increased its support for the program and now awards about $20,000 in scholarships annually. There are some common criteria that we use for the scholarships. Of course, number one would be superior academic performance, and you will see that these are fantastic students, and as a member of the committee, it's always so hard. I wish I was that good as an undergraduate, actually. Major in Latin American or related studies, including Spanish and Portuguese languages, and of course extracurricular activities or demonstrated experience related to Latin American countries or the Latinx community here in the Philadelphia area. So first off, we'd like to give the 2022 Janus Bond Awards. These are what Rami mentioned earlier, the senior awards, named after a former member of the association. These awards are presented to graduating seniors of area colleges and universities for general excellence in the courses related to Latin America. First, I'd like to ask Nicole Bonillas Felix from the University of Pennsylvania to come up and receive their award. Nicole is a major in Latin American and Latinx Studies with biology. Next, I would like to ask Olivia Clark from St. Joseph's University to come up here. Olivia is an international relations major with minors in Spanish and Latin American and Latinx Studies. Olivia Clark. Next, Mateus Fronza from Temple University. Mateus? Mateus is obviously a graduating senior at Latin American Studies and Economics majors. I think he has a couple of minors too. And I also want to ask another applause for him because he did win the 2021 RACE Award, but as that was on Zoom, nobody got to applaud him really. So let's give him for that as well. Next, I would like to ask Cullen Kisner. Is Cullen Kisner here? Actually, I believe no. Yeah, Cullen Kisner is from the University of Delaware. She couldn't attend today, that's what I have down. She majors in biology and Spanish with a 4.0 at graduation, so quite impressive. Yeah, really, give her, even though she won't hear it, you know, unless she's on Zoom. Okay, so then the fifth winner is Yuri Piozan from Temple University. Yuri is a global studies major with minors in history and Spanish language. Somebody told me he speaks Portuguese too. I'm not sure. And then our sixth winner of the Janus Bond's Graduating Senior Award is Daniel Ruiz de la Concha from the University of Pennsylvania. Daniel majors in International Relations and Urban Studies with a minor in Latin American and Latinx Studies, and he also didn't get applause in 2021. He is the Carmelita Manning Award Scholar from last year, so give him an applause that he didn't hear last year. We made up for it, Danielle. Now we come to the other, the main awards, I guess you would say. The 2022 Alejandro Reyes Award is Jose Valdivia of Swarthmore University. I'm sorry that Jose could not come today, but let me say something about the Alejandro Reyes scholarship anyways. It's awarded to a junior year undergraduate to be used for their senior year expenses, and of course related to Latin American studies in general. Jose is originally from a strong Mexican immigrant community in San Francisco Bay Area. He might be watching us right now on the Zoom. He's an honors student in Latin American and Latinx Studies and Religion at Swarthmore, and after graduation plans to pursue a PhD in Latin American and Latinx Studies. Again, he couldn't come today from Swarthmore because they have him working hard on a class project. So I'm sure if he's listening, give him a big hand. Our next award is the Irena Rivera Diaz Scholar, and this is Ignacio Vasconcelos Riva of Temple University. His mentor is here as well, Dr. Monica Ricketts. Ignacio is originally from Paraguay. He's a junior majoring in Latin American Studies and History at Temple, and after graduating from community college, so he transferred to Temple. Ignacio has been working as a paralegal with Central American asylum seekers and hopes to someday return to Paraguay after obtaining a graduate degree in Argentina, is what he had in his essay. So congratulations to Ignacio. Our next award is the 2022 Carmelita Manning Service Award Scholarship, and this is awarded to Angel Gutierrez of the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Kathy Barch is his mentor, who's here, so congratulations, Kathy, as well. The Manning Scholarship is awarded to an undergraduate student exemplifying the spirit of public service in either Latin America or the greater Philadelphia Latinx community. We believe that any personal endeavor should always be partnered with responsibility to serve the community. With this award, we hope to challenge students to participate in the community and help nurture a sense of global social responsibility and duty. Angel is a sophomore studying anthropology and philosophy. This summer, Angel will be conducting an oral history and archival project with family in Mexico that questions mestizaje and relationship to the land. After UPenn, although a first-generation college student, Angel hopes to continue graduate school to continue work in understanding land stewardship in Mexico. So, congratulations. Did he come up and get his already? Angel? Did you already give Angel's up? Yeah? All right. You guys are too fast for me.
We're very efficient.
Rami should be happy. So thank you to the other members of the scholarship committee, my co-chair, Rafael Arizmendi, Esquire from Congreso. Thank you, Ruben Reyes, for filling in because Rafa's still in school. Lorena Ahumada from Kleinbard, and she's a member of more board of directors than I can possibly even count, I saw. Dr. Richard Gioso, I can never pronounce Rick's name, from St. Joseph University. Arturo Guillen, who's treasurer of our organization, and of course, Dr. Abelardo Lecter, our prestigious chair. I would also like to thank the schools, the area schools that help us get the word out about the scholarships and so on, in particular schools of the Greater Philadelphia Latin American Studies Consortium, and they play an integral role in allowing us to get the information out to students. So thank you very much. I think that's it, Rami. I think I'm supposed to introduce you. Okay, so I would like to introduce now Abelardo Lecter, our chair of the board of directors.
Yes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to see all of you here. Many of us are seeing each other for the first time after 2 years, so it is delightful to have all of you here. My name is Abelardo Lecter. I am the chair of the board of the Pan American Association, and I'm here to introduce our keynote speaker. He's really a friend of the Pan American Association in the best sense of the word. He's been with us many times before, and he's just a terrific guy. We are so thankful to have him here today with us. There's an insert in your program that highlights his illustrious career both in the private sector and in the government. I'd like to just emphasize his extreme efficiency and diligence when he helped Uruguay negotiate a $1.5 billion loan with the United States Treasury. It was through his efforts and connections with President Bush that Uruguay was plucked out of a financial crisis, the collapse of the system. For that, he was recognized, justly so, by both the United States government and the government of Uruguay. He's a true Philadelphian, went to school here, started his career here, and we're delighted and honored to have him. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome for Ambassador Silverstein.
Thank you for those kind remarks. You know, our late Senator Arlen Specter used to say when someone would make such generous remarks, if my parents were here, my father would love it and my mother would believe it. You know, but I do want to recognize, well, first of all, you know, when the Pan American Association gave me a send-off when I was leaving for post, AB promised me that him and his better half would come down to Uruguay to visit, and he kept his promise, as did Edith Schwartz, one of your honorary consuls. So I do want to recognize that, and thank you for that. And, you know, God has blessed us with, my wife and I, with 6 children, and my oldest and my youngest are here, and I want to thank them for coming because they were part of that journey as well. So that's Douglas and Charles. Come on, you got your mom's good look. Say hello. So there was a reason for not recognizing you also, especially you, Douglas. So here we are. I get a call from the White House, and they said, you know what, we're sending the nomination over, but put your seatbelt on, because as you know, we just lost the Senate. It's now Democratic. So after I made my courtesy calls I had on my list, and my wife and I gathered the 6 kids. Charles was then 3.5, Douglas was 14, and we sat down and explained to them that they were about to leave the only house they ever knew, leave the only school they ever went to, the only synagogue they ever attended, and we were taking them to a country they never heard of and a place they didn't know existed. And just for good luck, we're throwing them into local schools, not the American school, so you're going to learn in a language you don't know. My son Andrew, who is now 11, starts crying. Douglas leans over, puts his arm around him and says, Andy, let me tell you about diplomatic immunity. We can do anything. Same reaction. So I looked at them, I said, yes, but you don't have immunity from your father. So it was the beginning of an interesting journey. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm sorry that I'm appearing under the circumstances of the tragedy that Ambassador Durán suffered, but it is coincidental that we both have our associations with Uruguay. I was asked to speak for 15 minutes and then perhaps take questions. To speak on Uruguay, perhaps on South America, perhaps on the role of an ambassador, mention something about a very interesting panel I was on yesterday in Miami, and a hard stop at 1 o'clock. Now, if I can do all that, I'm pretty good. I don't think it will. So we'll see where we go. It's a lot to do, but we'll see. 4 years in Uruguay really produced 8 years of memories. And I have a habit of speaking very frankly, but because we're recording, you'll have to read between the lines. If there's anything I can answer for you, please approach me afterwards. I'll be happy to speak even more frankly. Let me start with the book report version of Uruguay. Give you that black and white, and then after that, we'll add some color. So I'm going to look at my notes because, like I said, this is the book report. Okay? So for those of you who've never had the pleasure of going to Uruguay, it's a country of 3.5 million people, not particularly very large. It's nestled between 2 giants, Argentina and Brazil. It's a developing country with a very high-income economy, very highly educated. The literacy rate is higher than the United States. Part of the reason for that is college is free. Produces a lot of architects who are driving cabs, but college is free. If you look at indexes, which I have to admit is one of those things I don't like looking at because I'm not the book kind of guy, I'm more of a get-it-done kind of guy. But they're at the top of the list of like multiple indexes, and this one I am going to read, I apologize. But indexes that measure democracy, peace, a low perception of corruption, freedom of the press, the size of the middle class, which is 60% of the population, that's the highest in the Americas. Prosperity, there's almost no extreme poverty. Human Development Index, the GDP growth, innovation, infrastructure, economic freedom, income equality, per capita income, and the inflows of FDI, foreign direct investment. But simply put, what all that means, that list, is besides their financial wealth, Uruguay boasts first in democracy and peace within Latin America, as well as first in press freedom, the size of the middle class, and of prosperity. And again, for those of you who haven't had the benefit of knowing anything about Uruguay, economically, they're very much a commodity-driven economy. Cattle, we used to say that every cow had a full soccer field to graze on. Sheep, wool, rice, soybeans, wine, planted timber. One of the largest American businesses there is Weyerhaeuser. A very busy international seaport. And surprisingly, software development. Because they're so educated, they develop actually more software than Brazil, the giant to the north. $64 billion GDP, one of the largest in Latin America. But as a small country, when Argentina sneezes, Uruguay catches pneumonia. And that's exactly what happened a number of years ago, to what Ab referred to. And also as a small country, it invites enormous political pressure from their biggest trading partner, then, which was Argentina, and from Brazil, because the ramifications for kind of not towing the line. So it's always important to look at history and identifying the success of a country and how come Uruguay is so respected now and where they are economically and democratically. And frankly, the United States gets an enormous amount of credit for that. Historically, in this very same quarter, this very same 3 months, 4 major events happened. 9/11, the banking crisis in Uruguay, which resulted in closure, resulted in something you didn't see in Uruguay after the end of the military period, which is demonstrations, organized demonstrations, because they were being driven from outside the country, which created a lot of concern. Foot and mouth disease, which is something that impacts cattle, and they couldn't export cattle. That was shut off. That was their biggest export. And as I said, Argentina, who was their #1 trading partner, had a major economic collapse and meltdown. They had real riots. I mean, Latin American type riots, not the minor league things we see in the United States, okay? And that resulted in unemployment of over 20%. There was widespread poverty everywhere. You know, I was talking to the kids this past weekend over the holidays, and we were remembering how we used to have somebody who used to go through our trash to get food. It was unheard of in a country like Uruguay. But the president, with a 20% unemployment rate, his popularity was lower than the unemployment rate. So it was difficult to govern at the time. But the success of Uruguay today I believe, is directly tied to the actions of President George W. Bush and Condoleezza Rice, who was then the National Security Advisor. She wasn't yet the Secretary of State. And the reason for that is because within a very short period of time, the United States came forward with a $1.5 billion loan, and it was just for a couple of days until the IFIs could come in, international financial institutions could come in. And timing is everything in this world. We had Secretary of Treasury Paul O'Neill scheduled to come down, just happened to be before things imploded. He came down. The press wanted to know if he was showing up with dollars in the plane, which was kind of funny. But what that did is it stopped the demonstrations. It allowed the banks to open. Seeing a run on a bank is a very sad thing to see, people lining up like you've seen in Ukraine before when things got started. And then President Bush, and I was in the room, and it was interesting to watch, he told Condoleezza Rice, who he used to call Señorita Ardos, to get it done. And he was referring to the beef imports and to fast track it. That made an enormous difference on the unemployment rate. And then President Bajé, who is a wonderful, wonderful man, since passed away, publicly credited the United States and President Bush with saving his government, saving his country economically, but even more importantly, saving democracy in Uruguay. And that continues to today. Security-wise, partners are important. They're really important, even really small countries. Uruguay contributes more peacekeeping forces than anyone else in the world per capita. And that's very important for a lot of reasons. They're also a founding member of the United Nations, founding member of the OAS, Organization of American States, and a founding member of Mercosur, which their headquarters was actually a stone's throw from the embassy building. And right after 9/11, these kinds of values that Uruguay had, they proved indispensable. They proved indispensable in the war on terrorism. I mean, I can tell you without question that Uruguay, through their actions, saved American lives. Uruguay, through their actions, allowed the United States to assign our own military into other places and allow them to focus their assets where they were most needed. And these kinds of non-selfish motives, besides their interest in maintaining democracy, really come from the friendship that was built as a result of our government stepping in when the time was right. my time in Uruguay was a while ago, and for some of you who were born after 9/11, seems like a million years ago, but for those of us who were alive during 9/11, it was the most important event in our lives and defines many of us and our attitudes. And I can tell you that for me, arriving at Post just a few days after 9/11, it changed my entire agenda, changed my entire day every day. 95% of my day was on security and intelligence issues. We weren't able to focus on commercial. We weren't able to focus on those things. And as the only non-career ambassador in the entire South America at that time, it really allows you, and this is an important point because it distinguishes the non-career from career ambassadors. As a non-career ambassador, a political ambassador, I really don't care about my resume. I'm not there to build my resume, and I really don't care about my evaluation. Actually, in a meeting in the White House, the president turned to me and said, "Hey, Silver," he used to call me Silver. Excuse my language, please. He said, "I heard you're pissing people off down there." I got all red. I was watching President Baje's face. He said, "I guess that means you're doing a great job." A career ambassador is not going to upset people. They're worried about their evaluation every year. So you can be result-oriented. You can get a lot done. You can put the word out in the environment of after 9/11 to all the other embassies that the welcome mats here at our embassy, if there's something that you want to accomplish that you can't do where you are. And we did that. Uruguay had then and still has today their own security challenges. Iran has a very busy embassy in Uruguay. They were thrown out of Argentina. So they opened a regional embassy after the bombing of the Jewish Center. They were thrown out. I don't know now if they've returned to Buenos Aires or not, but they kept us very busy. Venezuela never stopped trying to undermine democracy in Uruguay. And Cuba, let me just say that Cuba is designated a state sponsor of terrorism for a reason, and it's true. And then there's something that a lot of us don't tend to deal with, which is still issues concerning the Basque movement and dealing with that in Uruguay as well. The open border with Brazil. The northern border, it's like walking across Spruce Street from Walnut Street in Chewy. I mean, it's you just walk across the street, you're in Brazil, come back, you're in Uruguay. One day we picked up the man behind the Luxor, Egypt massacre, just walking across the street into Uruguay. We had him in a Montevideo jail. That's a 2-hour story for another time, but really interesting. It's a port city, Montevideo, and as a result, you get all kinds. You get the money launderers, you get the arms smugglers, you get the globe-hopping terrorists. We had the radical Muslims, and if anybody ever complains to you about Guantanamo, you can tell them that you heard from the ambassador whose life was saved, and actually my children. That was from an assassination attempt against my family because of information we got from Guantanamo. So, I was trying to think how best to describe Uruguay when I got the call to please speak. And let me first tell you that there's 3 words I want to leave you with when it comes to Uruguay. And that's safe, safe, safe. It's a really safe place. It just is. I was on this panel in Miami yesterday. I flew back actually to be with you. And it was a very interesting panel. It was discussing, and I was asked, Alberto asked me to make some comments. Maybe later we'll talk about that. But it was about the left and the right in media and academia and government. And pretty interesting speakers. President Uribe, former vice presidents, former heads of national legislatures, national heads of security, the head of CNN Espanol. And I got to tell you, I was sitting there, I started to feel like Brenda Holloway. Does anybody know who Brenda Holloway is? You can't look at your phone. Brenda Holloway was the opening act for the Beatles at Chase Stadium in 1965. Nobody remembers the opening act at the Beatles. And then the OAS ambassador, the United States ambassador who was there for Clinton and then part of Bush and I were chatting, and he said, "That's right, Uruguay." And he looks at me and goes, "What a delightful country." And he said, me encanta, and I love it. And that really summed it all up. It really is a delightful country. I don't think I've ever met anybody who's been there who doesn't say that. There is a big difference between being a tourist and a resident. I mean, me and my family lived there for 4 years. But it really is. And a lot of people know Punta del Este. Why is Punta del Este famous? I do have to touch on this. It's geographically located in a very unique position. It gets the sweet waters of the Rio de la Plata coming all the way down from the northern part of Brazil, hitting it. That's the side you go swimming on and sunbathing. And on the other side, it gets the South Atlantic, waters that have touched South Africa, that have been looking for a home for probably decades, smashing against the shores. This contrast is something to behold, with pine trees in the middle, so the scent is just wonderful. So if you haven't been to Punta, I highly recommend it. But the people, like any country, are what make Uruguay the special place it is. And speaking to 2 PhD students here from Penn who are Uruguayos, so it's nice to see you. And for those who speak Spanish, the only way to describe it is they're muy simpático. I mean, just overboard muy simpático. Just simply very nice, sincere. My daughters all have permission in advance to marry an Uruguayan. I don't even have to meet them. Actually, I said, if he has a pulse, say yes, I'll meet him tomorrow. It's okay. Things move at a slower pace there. And I'm not saying this as a diplomat who was removed from everyday life, because my children did not attend the American school. That was intentional. We put them in the local schools. So in the schools they were in, they were the only foreigner. There were no other diplomats there. There were no other business people's children there. It was all Uruguayans and my kids. So as a result, get to go to class events and programming and things, and you just get more into the community. And you just get to experience life beyond the diplomatic corps. And sometimes it's the little things that make a difference in life, and there's little things you remember. And I always remember when the kids' friends would come over, they would never leave without walking around the room and kissing everybody goodbye, individually. The level of respect for adults was just unbelievable. And again, this is not my looking through it through rose-colored glasses, because, as I said, 4 years is a long time. The neighborhood, I'm trying to give you a kind of a color picture. I mean, the neighborhood parks had rides that were from the 50s. Like, it was just something to behold. The feria, the market you would go to, was just very simple. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't like going to and I'm seeing some heads shaking, so I know you've been there. We're there the first day. Second day, we're walking through the mall in town near Carrasco, or near Positos, excuse me. Let's go shopping. Remember that commercial? Okay. And we're hearing oldies music on the radio. And I was talking to somebody, and all I heard was oldies music. And I was talking to somebody in the embassy the next day. He said, "No, that's not an oldie station. That's the music now. That's what people are listening to." Which begot the joke that if you I met a lot of doctors here today, if you get a bad diagnosis from your physician, you go to Uruguay because you can get an extra 10 years to live. Because things just come a little slower. But slower is a good thing sometimes. And a lot of the problems they have, regretfully, are driven from the outside. I'm doing good on time. Okay. Let me briefly touch on the role of an ambassador, because, a lot of you, and you're obviously a sophisticated audience, or you wouldn't be here. And thank you for the interest you show in a very important part of our hemisphere. But I find a lot of people who aren't as involved as you are don't know very much about what an ambassador does. And I think first to recognize is that an ambassador is the personal representative and the emissary of the President of the United States, for American ambassador, or for any country with their head of state. And you speak in the President's name. So what that means historically is, believe it or not, you had the power to declare war. And you even outrank in country the Secretary of State and the Vice President of the United States. As the chief of the mission, and you're running a mission with representatives from multiple departments around the United States government, the biggest challenge is getting folks to speak with one voice. And it's very important because if you don't direct and coordinate that, some of them have different agendas, and they're from different agencies, and that presents challenges, but it's very important. It's also important to give frank counsel to the President and frank counsel to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State was easier to disagree with. The President is not as easy, but this particular President did take counsel. Making sure we meet our foreign policy goals. I mean, we're there for a reason. Security, not just for the mission, but most importantly for American citizens, for American businesses. That was very important to us, especially because it was immediate post 9/11. And projecting American values, because American values are worth bragging about. I'm first generation American. There's not a day I don't thank God for being raised and born in this country. Being a non-career ambassador has a lot of advantages to being a career ambassador. Beyond what I said before about worrying about resumes or reviews, it's the relationship you have with the President of the United States, because you didn't become a political ambassador if you didn't have one. And actually, President Bajé told me many times, he says, we were thinking of refusing agrément if we got a career ambassador where they have to approve. He wanted somebody who could pick up the phone and call the President. Now, I didn't have to do that very often, thankfully, but had the ability to do it when I needed to do it, and that's very important. When you're an ambassador, aside from being, whether you're career or non-career, everybody returns your phone call. Nobody turns down an invitation to come to the residence. And we had a pretty cool residence, I have to admit. Not bad for public housing. They built it to look like the White House. But I was cautioned that before I left for post, I remember someone telling me, you have to be careful in a small country, because in a small country, the US ambassador is viewed after the president as the second most powerful person in the country, because the United States is so powerful. And as a result, you get the downside of that is you have a very high profile. And the reason that's a downside is because you're living in a fishbowl. If you pick your nose, you're going to see it on the front page of the paper the next day. It's just the way it is. The upside of that is you can get things done, and that's important. And if that's your motive for wanting to do what I did, which it was for me, and for wanting to help people, it's the right place to be. But it's very, very important for any of you who find yourself in that position one day, or in other positions where you have a level of authority or power, you have to keep reminding yourself that the deference you get, the respect you get, it's not about you. It wasn't about me. It was about the title. As soon as you start thinking it's about you, you got a problem. You just do. It can be very intoxicating when, I remember the first time I went back to DC for meetings, and I didn't know, and I had to open my own door. I'm like, wow, I haven't had to do this in a long time. You're not allowed. I mean, you can't. The bodyguards will slap your hand if you open your own door. They got to do it, do their thing. And if you start thinking you're so important, that's just not good. I said before, you outrank the Vice President of the United States in country, but when you go back to DC, I think the only person you outrank by protocol is the mayor of Washington. So that wakes you up real fast. The panel, let's switch gears here a little bit. The panel that I was on yesterday was at FIU, at Florida International University, which is a pretty interesting university. I was very impressed. The focus was on leftist influence in the media, in government, in academia. And being Miami, for those of you who spend time there, or those of you who follow what's going on there, they've especially focused on Cuba and Venezuela, and now, of course, even more in the news, Nicaragua, who just officially left the OAS a day or two ago. And the very aggressive efforts that they take in trying to influence democratic governments. The point I took away from that, and Ab asked me this, what my one takeaway was, it was something I wasn't aware of, which is when they can succeed nationally, there's a very aggressive effort, and Ab, especially in Colombia, to influence at the local level in the mayoral offices, and they're describing that. And I found that very interesting, that was going on in the major cities. Another interesting observation that was made was one of the journalists, I think from CNN Espanol. He was saying that, you know, if we took these leftists in New York and showed them what leftists are in Latin America, Marxists and the communists, if we took these right-wingers, right-wing extremists, by leftists they're referring to leftist extremists, not leftists, took the right-wing extremists in Miami, which was a lot, by the way, and showed them a Latin military dictatorship, they would understand that what they're advocating for has consequences and really isn't always the best thing. You know, North Americans, Anglos, are pretty ignorant of Latin America. I think when I was first going to Uruguay, I remember one of my kids' classmates said, "Oh, Uruguay, I know where that is. It's next to Russia." I'm like, you know, if you ask somebody in New York about Latin America, they think people from Mexico, most of the time people from Puebla. I don't think there's anybody left in Puebla. I think they're all New York or Philadelphia. It's kind of interesting. Every time I talk to a Mexican, they're from Puebla. Or they're from El Salvador. You speak to someone in Los Angeles about a Hispanic, they think El Salvador or Mexican also. Speak to someone in Miami, they think Cuban, Venezuelan, Colombian. And they group them all together. And we know in this room, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, someone from Guatemala City, where I've spent quite a bit of time the last couple of years, and Buenos Aires have nothing in common except a common language. I mean, culturally, history, everything is different. So in both descriptions and in solutions, one size does not fit all. I think the biggest challenge we face with United States foreign policy overall, as applies to the world, is that we're reactive. We're not proactive. We saw it recently, and this is not a political commentary, it's just a fact, what happened in Ukraine, how reactive we were and not proactive, and some of the consequences of that. But you know, there's been a lot in the news about Title 42. Let me take that to a human level, and we'll wrap it up here. My father, who was an immigrant, came here when he was 14, same age, Douglas, you went to Uruguay, who was probably the smartest man I ever knew. He used to say that the key to success is looking at things from, my boys are mouthing it because I teach this to all my 6 kids, is looking at things from the other person's perspective. And I truly believe that. So let's look at it from the perspective of everywhere around the world, probably about 8 o'clock at night. Mother and father are sitting at the place where the best and most decisions are made in the household, which is the kitchen table. And what are they talking about? Nothing different than you and I talk about. How can we do things better for our kids? How can we give them a better future? How can we give them a better education? How can we give them better job opportunities? And you know, in the news now, Syrians are not rushing to fight in Ukraine because they believe in what's going on there. They're going there to fight to get $800. And if we don't take steps to address that, then what we are doing is we don't just have a migration challenge at the border, but what we have is we're creating ammunition. We're creating fodder for the far left or the far right. Governments rule best from the middle, not from extremes. The Trump administration, previous administrations, prioritized, President Trump directed for investment in the Northern Triangle to OPEC. President Biden, I salute him for sending Vice President Harris to Central America to talk about creating investment. But what we can do as Americans is we can't just talk about it. We really do have to encourage our government and private investors to take steps, the government to create a clear pathway, private investors to take the chance on a good return, to invest to create jobs in Latin America, not just Central America, but South America as well, because it's in our interest. It's in our national interest. It's in our national interest to have those secure borders that come from that. It's in our national interest to have a stable hemisphere, which comes from someone being able to work and not, and I have in no way am I comparing Syria to Latin America. Please don't take that. What I'm pointing out is just this need to be able to earn money. And nobody wants to leave their parents. Nobody wants to leave their hometown where their grandparents are buried. They'd rather stay where they are if they have opportunity. So I think it's important to do that, and important to advocate to that, and it will lead to a stable hemisphere, and it will lead to easier answers for the parents who are sitting at that table discussing their children's future. Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Ambassador, for those interesting and helpful remarks, and I appreciate your willingness to take one or two questions. So, any questions for the Ambassador? We got it over here. So, Brian and then Arturo. Brian Brown, one of our newest members of the League of the Pan American Association, who reminds me every time I see him. Yes, Brian. Question is, how do we model democracy for the rest of the world, given the conflicts we see at home?
America's not a perfect place, but it's the best experiment there ever was. And all we can do is shine a light on those things we do well and be open to discussing those things we can do better. It's not a diplomatic answer, it's the answer. I mean, no one's perfect, no country is perfect. Being in Uruguay when the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, a long time ago, was not easy. And we can only point to what it is we try to do better and the reasons why we do it. So.
Arturo?
The same, you were going to ask the same question, Arturo?
Is there another question for the ambassador?
Well, that means I either answered everything or I really put you to sleep, one or the other.
All right.
Okay?
Hold on just a second. Thank you very much, Ambassador Martin J. Silverstein. And we have a gift to commemorate your visit to the Pan American Association. I'm going to ask Joe Hare, our former president, to present it. So again, we appreciate your remarks, Ambassador Silverstein. I hope you all agree that this has been a memorable Pan American Day and Annual Scholarship Award Luncheon. It's been our pleasure to have you here. The association has had a long-standing reputation not only for advancing knowledge, understanding, and engagement among the peoples of the Americas, but also for being a beacon of hope to Philadelphia and beyond, according to former U.S. Ambassador Thomas Shannon. Today's event would not have been possible without the hard work of many volunteers, but I want to give a shout out to our Chairman Ab Lecter, all of our officers, Ruben, Arturo, Diana, Luncheon Steering Committee, and Education Committee, who continue to look for innovative ways to deliver programming you deserve and have come to expect from the association. I also ask respectfully that you keep Ambassador Durán's family in your thoughts and prayers in the days ahead. In closing, our all-volunteer organization depends on you, our members, attendees, and sponsors to support and guide our efforts to programming you have come to guide our efforts to provide the programming you have come to expect and appreciate. So until our 82nd annual meeting and Clothier Award Luncheon on Wednesday, October 26th, thank you for being with us here today to share in the spirit of Panamericanismo that allows all of us in this hemisphere to share in the privilege of being called Americans. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.